Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. We're still seeing folks trickling in, but I'm going to get us started so that we have as much time as possible for our learning today. So first of all, welcome to Torah as Light, Wisdom Through the Darkness. Today we'll be learning with David Levin-Kruss a few things before we begin learning together. First, we have an update from Pardesniks in Jerusalem. I'm going to share some photos of this update as I'm speaking. So we have seen that a lot of our students have really been connecting with volunteer opportunities right now. So what you'll see in these pictures are two scenes of our students volunteering to clean up different bomb shelters in different communities in Israel. One is a group of students went and teachers went to go help clean up a bomb shelter in an elderly community and in an apartment building that houses elderly people in particular. Apparently that bomb shelter was in such a state of filth and disrepair that residents had been staying in their homes during the sirens. So this was a really special opportunity to make some real meaningful change for a group of people in that circumstance. And today, a group of students at Pardesniks, led by the student art fellow, went to paint a bomb shelter in a children's school to make it a less depressing and scary place for the children. So that is something that is happening right now among our students and our staff and faculty. And it's really wonderful to see the way that people are coming together in that context at this moment. So now we want to dedicate today's learning and this whole series to the loved ones in the Pardesniks family who have been called into service in Israel. I'm sharing a link in the chat to the Pardesniks website where you can see a list of the names of the loved ones of our staff and family, staff and faculty and extended Pardesniks family. And I invite you now to share in the chat any names of anyone else that you would additionally like to dedicate today's learning to. So while folks are sharing those names, we're going to take 30 seconds in silence to set an intention for our learning. Thank you all so much. I'm now going to hand it over to David Levin-Kruss. The Jordan Steifman is going to be sharing her screen so that you can see what we're learning today. And that's it from me. Take it away.
Good evening, afternoon, morning, everybody, depending on where you are. I'm sorry to be re-meeting some of you or meeting some of you for the first time under these trying circumstances. But given the situation, it is good to be here and good to see people. The class that we're calling today, they called the class is saying goodbye to my soldier sons, and it's basically based around the real events that happened last week when I had to say goodbye to my sons before they were going to the army. The picture here is not of them, it's an illustrated picture. I'll also tell you that I'm going to tell two stories about my sons, that there is a move afoot that rabbis and teachers should not speak about their children without asking them first. So I have gotten my kids' permission to tell this story. So on the Shabbat that the one Simchat Torah, when the war broke out, I was at home and I was told that my son, my oldest son, had been called up to the north, and I immediately rushed to the house where he was, and I said to him, "Would you like me to make sandwiches and for you to take with you?" And he answered, "No," he said, "I actually don't want sandwiches. but you make them anyway. Now, I'm not quite sure what he meant by that, but I think he knew me and he knew that I needed something to do. And he knew that making sandwiches was the kind of activity that I would somehow calm me down. So he took the sandwiches with him. A few days later, something similar happened, and that is that my other son was called up, and there I had a little bit more time. So I immediately rushed to the kitchen and started baking. And I like to make, when they're in the army, I like to make some type of a cookie that has protein in it, because there's not always enough food in the army, unfortunately. So I want to give them at least a cookie that's good for them. So I made peanut butter cookies. And then I decided to make tahina cookies. So I don't know if anybody remembers the scene in Friends where now I've forgotten who, Rachel. Rachel is making cottage pie, is making trifle. Anybody remember this? Smile if you remember this. She's making trifle, and the pages get joined together, and she makes a mixture of a trifle and a cottage pie. Basically, that's what I did. I was so nervous that I just saw tahina on top of the recipe, and I ended up making tahina scones instead of tahina cookies, which is what I planned to make. I tasted it at some point and I said, this doesn't taste right. So I think everybody knows what a scone is, like it's a biscuit in America, like a Britishy thing, very, very British. I gave them to my son and I said to him, please, I said, when you get to the army, go straight to the cook and say you need clotted cream to put with these scones, that these scones need clotted cream. So a few days later, I said to him, well, did you get the clotted cream? And he gave the very typical laconic Israeli answer. He says, no. That was it. So I'm afraid that the cuisine is not quite up to high tea at a fancy British hotel. But after this incident, I actually said to myself, this is my way of dealing with a goodbye. That are there Jewish sources? Is there guidance in Jewish tradition about how to say goodbye to people, especially in quite a difficult circumstance? I'm going to share with you today three very, very short texts. It's very, very short time that we have together. Three short texts that have helped me. And they're about saying goodbye, but I think there are messages in all three of these texts which will help us in our current situation. I was just speaking to my colleagues beforehand and asking how people are doing. It's a time where people from abroad are helping Israelis, where people in Israel are helping each other, and people abroad are helping each other. Many Jews are feeling alone in all different ways. And it really is a time where we look onto each other. I can't speak for everybody. It's a time where I look for others for support, and where I look for others for support. And I think that there are little messages to. I see there's some problems putting up the PowerPoint. It might be me. This is my first time I ever actually made a PowerPoint using Google. So I've used PowerPoint, Microsoft until now. So can we look at the first text, Jordan? Can we look at the first text? The one that's after saying goodbye, the one that says to, yes, that one. So here is a saying from Sotah about saying goodbye. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says the name of Rav. Kol hamelaveh et chavero, arba amot be'ir, eno nizok. Whoever accompanies their friend 4 amot, about 4 meters, in a city will not be harmed. There's a custom which halakha that many people still keep, which is when somebody comes to visit you. I have a friend who walks us all the way to the car, which I really, really love this idea that you're not saying goodbye. You're walking all the way. And there's a really lovely feeling when you walk with somebody and you leave. It just delays it just a little bit. It makes you feel good. It makes the transition not as strong if somebody walks with you to the car. The Eno Nizok is very interesting. It will come to no harm. Perhaps for some of us it will have theological implications or problems. It could mean the most naturalistic explanation is that the friend will come to no harm. Once they put on the road, once people see that there are people that they know and care about them, there may be less likelihood of them attacking them. It could also mean that the person accompanying will come to no harm for the accompaniment. And if we want to be really grandiose, maybe the friend who accompanies will never come to any harm. But of course, you and I know that this is not true. You and I know that this is not true. You can accompany people and they come to harm. And whenever people speak about this, I always think of an insight of the sociologist and anthropologist Peter Berger, who speaks about a child crying at night. A child cries at night, and in his scenario, it's the mother. The mother comes and says to the child, "Don't worry, everything will be all right." And Peter Berger points out that in some level, the mother is lying to the child. The mother is saying to the child, everything will be all right, but she doesn't know whether everything could be all right. Terrible, terrible things can happen. So he says on one level, the mother is lying. But he says on another level, the mother isn't lying. When she says everything will be all right, she's saying we have the capabilities to deal with what is going to happen. We have a life. We have a life understanding. We have a way of looking at the world that even if it is sometimes challenged, we'll be all right. We'll be able to get back to ourselves. She's reassuring the child, not that everything will physically be all right, but there are tools in this world to deal with it, and life still has meaning, even if things can sometimes go wrong. And to my mind, this is a very powerful first stage in support. To be there, just to simply be there. Rabbi Harold Kushner points out that Job's comforters didn't do a very good job, but they turned up. They came just to be there, to walk a little bit, not in the other person's shoes, because, we can't do that. We just cannot do that. It's a nice, sweet saying, but we can't do it. But we can walk with somebody, as the song says, not behind them and not in front of them, but together with them. We can walk together with them, just for a little while, accompany them, and in some way, however it might be, with a word, with a touch, with a smile, somehow assure them that things will be all right, whatever all right might be. So I'd say the first stage of really effective support for somebody else is to be present, to be part of their lives for just 4 cubits, and to reassure them in whatever way one can that things will be all right. Let's look at the next slide, Jordan. Yeah. So, V'chen Tana Mari bar Berei de Rav Huna, Berei de Rav Yirmiyah, bar Abba, Mari, the grandson of Rav Huna, the son of Yirmiyahu ben Abba. Now you know his full genealogy. Said, Al yefater adam mechavero, a person should only take leave of their friends, mitoch devar halacha, by sharing a matter of halacha, shematoch kach zachrehu, because that way he'll remember them. Before we daven, before we pray, this Gemara says, don't study a hard halacha, because you'll be unsettled, and instead of davening, you will be thinking about the halacha. But before, when you leave somebody, talk about some matter. It could be a halachic matter, and somebody pointed out to me that halacha is practical, and very often you do talk about practical things when you meet somebody. But talk about some matter that is of interest and is meaningful, and that is a good way to remember the person, because afterwards you think about it when you're on the plane, or when you're on the way to the base. You remember, oh, that's what they spoke about. And I've really seen this happen. It's not only with halakha, sometimes it's a political matter or an argument that people don't see each other for a few years and will pick up on what they were saying before. And for another time, another class, a longer one, there's a wonderful Rashi and Midrash about how Joseph sent an encoded message to Jacob. Very, very beautiful, very beautiful Rashi. But this, again, this is sometimes really done by people. There's something very powerful about leaving with a halacha. And I think from this, we also learn something very, very strong. One is, I'm going to give three messages from this, one contradictory to the other, but we'll manage. I think there are three messages. One is, don't be afraid to talk about real stuff. Don't be afraid to talk the real issues. We often think, oh, it's best. Everybody's smiling now when I spoke about friends, and it's nice to think of something like that. But don't be afraid to speak about real things. Secondly, sometimes a halacha might be easier to discuss than the thing itself. Last night I was at a meeting, and for people to discuss, and I just thought this was there's no cleverness behind this. I just thought it was a icebreaker. I asked people to share a tefillah that they like or a scenery they like, one or the other. I just thought it was an icebreaker. In fact, everybody spoke about something very personal, but it was contained. It was a tefillah. It was a piece of nature. It wasn't tell us every single lost feeling that you have at the moment. So the second message is it should be contained. And again, now I'm going against the Gemara. What becomes before this is it says, don't talk about kalud rosh, don't talk about idle matters. But sometimes there's a little place for idle matters as well. There was, on some night of the war, my wife and I just watched Young Sheldon. It was like that was all our minds were actually up to doing. So I think if a first level is be there, be with the person, and try and reassure them in some way of the meaning of life. These are hard stuff. I'm not saying this is easy. It's easy to give a little devour about it. It's much harder to do it. I'd say second stage is to talk about the matter themselves, to talk about the matter in a way that might be easier for people. Sometimes just to talk and to keep things going. Let's look at the next one. This is from the end of Brachot, from the end of the Mishnah Brachot. I hope I make this. This is just something that I thought of today. I hope I emotionally make this one. So the end of Brachot, it says, the background to this is very, very hard, historically very interesting, but it seems that what was happening was that Yiddishkeit, it wasn't called Yiddishkeit then, of course, Jewishness was at a low ebb, and the rabbis were looking for ways to bring Jewishness into people's lives in a more powerful or direct way. And they said that you should use God's name more often. Up until then, there was a much greater taboo about using God's name. And they're saying, no, it is okay to use God's name in a more robust way. So they hitkinu, and they brought a takana, they instituted, Sheyeh Adam Shoel et Shalom Chavero B'Shem. A person should ask about the welfare of their friend using the name of God. We unwittingly do this ourselves today. Many of us who speak English, God goodbye actually originally means God be with you. And it got turned into goodbye. But we actually unwittingly, even the most atheists of us, do say God be with you every time we say goodbye to somebody. And then it brings thoughts. Then it brings proofs. It's a Shenemar, and it says, V'hinei Boaz ba meBeit Lechem. This is the Ruth story, the story of Ruth. Boaz comes from Beit Lechem. Vayomer lekotzrim Hashem imachem. And he says to his reapers, God is with you. He's giving it as a statement of reality. God is with you. God is present. Vayomru law, and then the reapers, the farmers, the workers say back to him, Yivarechecha Hashem, may God bless you. This seems all very sweet, but since I am a closet Marxist, I actually read this a little bit with Marxist eyes, and I saw that the capitalist was able to say, God is with you. He was able to be sure that God is with you, whereas the workers were a little more tentative. They said, may God bless you. They weren't so sure that God was actually with them or with him, but they said it more aspirationally, may God be with you. But then there's something else, and then it brings something else. Because I just thought of this today. I don't know if it holds up. You can write to me and tell me if it doesn't. The Omer, and then they give a third text. And this is talking about the story of Gideon. When Gideon comes, and it says, this part is not in the Mishnah, and the angel of God appeared to Gideon and said to Gideon, Hashem imcha gibor chayil. God is with you, hero, strong hero. What does it say here? Mighty man of valor, strong hero. And this actually brings the two together. It is a statement of reality. God is with you, mighty man of valor. But it is also said by an angel, and therefore it's actually reality. It's truth. It's not human beings trying their hardest to come to some kind of an understanding. So another way to leave off of somebody is to bless them. I have to say, when both kids left, I did think of giving them the blessing from Friday night, the Yavarecha, but some part of it felt overly dramatic, and I just felt that it would maybe make them feel worse than they were feeling. It was like maybe better to do what we did, which was to pretend that it was just going off somewhere, and we are who we are, who we are in these situations. But it just felt too much for me. But I think another thing is to bless a person, and that's also something we can do to each other. I hope this will be better for you. I'm praying that this will be whatever the case might be. So we've seen really it's more than three actually, three different structures for dealing with others and for ourselves, and for being support, being there, walking in the other person's shoes, and assuring them that things will somehow be all right, whatever that might mean. A second one is to not be afraid of speaking about matters of substance and weight, and also to know that there's sometimes a time not to do that. And finally, to feel free to bless each other. My deepest hope is that the angel of God will appear to all our soldiers and be with them, that they will be mighty men of valor, come home safe in body, safe in soul. May all the captives be freed. May all the soldiers be healthy, and may everybody who has suffered such terrible losses be comforted and healed. And although it'll never be the same, know joy again. Thank you very much for joining, and Jordan will announce it, but I also wanted to say it personally. If anybody wants to stay around afterwards, I'm going to stick around for 15 minutes. We can process what I've said. People can share, but it finishes. I think Jordan, I think I've taken away your announcement. It finishes at the 30, but people are welcome to stay afterwards.
Thank you so much. Thank you, David, for sharing your heartfelt Torah with all of us. And thank you all for coming today. As David mentioned, this does close at 1:30 Eastern, but you all are welcome. Anybody who would like to, who's available to, stay on for an additional 15 minutes for questions. We will be meeting again next Monday is our next gathering at, again, 1 p.m. Eastern. for a class featuring Nechama Goldman Barish, teaching on what does it mean to be created in the divine image. Before you go, we're going to be sending a survey in the chat. We would love to gather information from you all on how else you would like to be supported in this time, and any other ways that you might feel you have support to offer or something to offer to the Pardesnik community. I just dropped that survey in the chat, and it'll be sent out in an email afterwards as well. So thank you again, David. Thank you again to all of you, and we'll stick around for another 15 minutes.